Hey legends, and welcome back to the least knowledgeable sim racing channel. A few days ago, I was approached by a gentleman representing Global Endurance Modding, a team working together with Advanced Simulation, formerly known as RSS, a team you may have heard a thing or two about over the years. They were planning to release a Ginetta G60-LT-P1 car for rFactor 2, which would make it the first current generation LMP1 car to be released on the rFactor 2 platform. A momentous occasion to be sure, as this has come up time and again in the rFactor 2 community as a request. As someone that's quite unfamiliar with driving prototypes, I found it odd that they would approach me, but I delighted in the opportunity to test drive this car all the same. As rFactor 2 is arguably the premier platform for multi-class endurance racing, I thought it'd be awesome to set up a multi-class race at the one and only Circuit de la Sarthe, so we could see just how much quicker these LMP1s actually are than the other classes available in rFactor 2 at present. To add an even bigger twist to our race, this would be the very first time I ever drove rFactor 2 using an RTX 3080 running my new OLED TV at 120Hz in 4K. That is to say that yes, this is our very first 4K video ever, so if you have a HD TV in the lounge, load this video up and marvel at the glory of fully rendered high-def rFactor 2. It ran amazingly fast from cockpit view, but as you can see, the exterior shots caused some issues. We'll get right into the race now, but before we do, consider hitting that subscribe button for more 4K rFactor 2 and other sim goodness as we get spooled up further into 2021. So here's us, going down the opening start line here at Circuit de la Sarthe. I should take this occasion to let you in on two small tidbits of knowledge. One, I'm not a big prototype driver, and two, I'm not a big Le Mans driver, so you're gonna see a pretty mediocre attempt at this vehicle, but still, I'm doing my best against an AI that I believe is set anywhere between about 103 and 105, so nothing particularly enthralling, but you can already see that we've completely left the rest of the field behind. Believe it or not, there's a full grid here. There's 4 of us LMP1 cars, the Ginetta of course. There's LMP2s behind us, and a whole grid of GTEs behind them. A lot of GTEs, and my hope was that eventually we would start to lap the GTEs, so let's see if that actually happens by the end. Now, you can already see that driving here at Le Mans in the LMP1s, it's like playing a game of aerodynamic slot cars. You're basically just using drafting to constantly go in and out in front of each other. It's a really interesting dynamic kind of racing that I'm personally not used to. Being a guy that came from a rally background originally, the role of aerodynamics is relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. In fact, they're kind of your enemy because you're kind of trying to break them so you can go sideways half the time. So as we have all these massive straights broken up by chicanes, well, it's a completely different form of racing to me, and that's what I enjoy the most about sim racing, is leaving my comfort zone, being challenged with something very different, which of course this LMP1 represents. Now of course going into this I tried to break the setup, but I wasn't very successful. Now the default setup here with the Le Mans Aero package has the rear sway bar already detached. It's got the traction control in the car at about 5, which, believe it or not, if I set it much lower than that, I wasn't actually really gaining time like I would in the GTE cars. So that was it was kind of nice, to be honest, to actually be able to lean on the assists a little bit more, to let the car do its own thing, to lean on the traction control, to lean on the aerodynamics. As you can see me making up massive time next to the leader here. But how long? How long can I hold the position for as I use the side draft? Not very long at all, it seems. I mean, I'm just not used to the balance of performance here. I can't believe that he managed to overtake me on the inside there. Like, I can't believe that these cars are capable of that kind of pace. So, for my mind right now, I'm locked into the GTEs. They're the cars I drive the most, especially the Corvette C8R, probably my current favorite car in motorsport. To go from that to this, it's almost like switching the physics to arcade, but that's in no way rFactor's fault, obviously, because these cars are very much like switching the physics to arcade in real life as well. As we go into the S's, which is probably one of my weakest spots on the entire track, I just have no feel for this. Not to say that I can't develop a feel for it, but it's definitely something I'll need to work on over time. I do really enjoy it in these cars though, that feeling of really trying to hold on to the aero, really leaning on it to just pull you into those corners. Just a surreal level of performance. And the chicanes, of course, I'm always wondering how fast will the car stop, how much do I have left in reserve to actually make the turn, but it's all very kind, it's all very nice. So first lap has gone off relatively without a hitch, so 3:23, very mediocre time. I believe these cars and I start to average in the 3:20s. Now from what I heard, people were doing 3:16s or so. I've not min-maxed the setup, nor am I particularly good at this track, so saying that I'm about 4 seconds off pace sounds about reasonable to me at this point in time. So you're certainly not going to find any esports inspiration here, that's for sure. So I'm going to say Sector 1, probably my favorite part of Le Mans, probably because it's the least like the rest, as we run very, very wide. I got a little bit over enthusiastic there as I lost aero trailing this gentleman here. Kind of understeered off the track completely. Again, using that insane draft to just get forward. I'm trying to push him out from behind this guy so I can continue my drafting exploits before we get to the first chicane here. But no such luck, as I'm still stuck firmly in third place. Those blinking brake lights, a hallmark of rFactor 2's AI. You may notice that the AI is actually very raceable at this point in time, and that's because it's not really stock rFactor 2 AI. I've tweaked some things in the player.json file. That's something I plan to go over in a future video, show you guys how to get the most out of this AI. I believe when you do set them up correctly, if you drive the right track with the correct AIW, you can have some of the best offline racing in all of sim racing with the rFactor AI, you know, excluding the gentleman that just used me as a bump stop there. So at this point, I'm like, all right, that was a pretty big mistake. Am I going to be able to catch up? Because if you lose the draft, that's pretty much it. Like once you've left that range, that you're no longer in the running. So my hope is to really brake late here, get in there, and hopefully get a good exit, which I don't do at all. So fingers crossed I can catch up, that they slow each other down on the straight here, playing slot cars with one another. So you probably want me to talk about the actual car at this point in time. See, not being particularly experienced in prototypes gives me a very bad basis of comparison. I've of course driven the two LMP2s and the one LMP3 in rFactor that are there as official content, and I mean sure they were fun and good and everything, and the recent Ligier, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was alright. It seemed okay, it didn't particularly inspire me. When I first drove this, not that I have any point of relevance, but this is the most fun and intuitive prototype I've ever driven in sim racing. For whatever that's worth, from my limited experience. I enjoyed a great deal. The fact that it's a free mod is kind of insane. Like, this is more than high quality enough to be a paid mod, but they opted to release it for free, so props to them. I mean, I'm actually catching them on the S's, which to me is like mind-blowing at this point in time, because I suck. I so suck at this. But no, we're definitely making up some ground. I think the last sector here with the chicanes is one of my favorites again. We get towards the final straight, and back towards my favorite section of the track, Sector 1, all those undulations, and oh my god, okay. Okay, so we could say that there are some slight holdover physics issues left at play. Whether or not that's the car or rFactor is up to you guys to decide in your flame wars in the comments, I'm sure. But it's always fun to see stuff like that. Reminds you that you are, in fact, still in the virtual realm, despite these gorgeous 4K graphics. I did set this up to be about 10 times time compression, so we should start to see the sun go down ever so gradually, start to see the hues become ever softer and more orange, as late afternoon gives way to early evening. And one thing I always find rFactor so compelling to drive. You know, you can say what you will about where it's at its stage of development, but there's something about the driving experience that just makes me want to do one more lap. It really is the best way to characterize it. You just get one more lap-itis, and before you know it, you've been at it for hours and hours and hours. And from someone that isn't really into the Le Mans thing, who doesn't really get behind this kind of like straight line draft racing, the fact that I was this compelled is quite remarkable. I would imagine if you're doing a full endurance event, you start to lap the lower class cars, that's when things would start to get really, really exciting. And it was definitely my hope that I would start to encounter some of the GTE cars later on in this race. As Mr. Draft Mania starts to catch up, take my inside. One of the great things about the AI set to these settings is I can actually treat them as human beings. I mean, I let him take the inside there. There was really not much I could do. I could have pushed him in. I could have squeezed him a little bit, but not much point doing that as I'm going to catch up here anyway. This constant sort of to and fro. I've got to say this AI is really racing me. Like, I was really having a good time during this. You can see the shadows are already starting to get longer as the sun drops in the horizon. Starting to see those PBR shaders take effect on the road surface as the sun's glare starts to be reflected back at us. Certainly a lot to be said about how far rFactor has come in terms of its audio-visual, well, more visual presentation over the last 4 years or so. The audio aspect has a ways to go yet, for sure. As I still try and work out like what this car is actually capable of there. I'm in disbelief at how hard it can take that turn. And here, of course, trying not to lock the brakes because we, of course, don't have ABS on this. We want to be authentic, or as authentic to the car as we can. So TC somewhere around 4 and ABS completely off because, of course, this car doesn't have it. Not a particularly enthralling sounding car though, is it? Some amazing handling characteristics through these S's. It's almost unbelievable you can do what you can do. As we gradually catch the leader on our hyper-aggressive run through the S's. Oh, on the inside, as we almost go too wide into the chicane and he decides to pretend that we're not there. AI be AI after all. I mean, as good as they can get, you know, they're still going to pull little things. Alright, so considering we will slow down there, I'd say a 320 is pretty good. I mean, this is with a reasonable fuel load as well, so maybe I'm not as bad at Le Mans as I think I am. I mean, I'm not great, but, you know, maybe there's room for potential as I get spun. No! Absolute disaster as I hit the rear end of the leader and end up at the back of our little 4-man race. Let's see if I can catch up. One of the more frustrating things about the rFactor AI is certainly the fact that when you make contact, you almost invariably come off worse than they do. And this is something that's quite different to when you make contact with AI in ACC or AC, where the cars will actually, you can actually impart some of your momentum onto them and spin them out rather than you just kind of bouncing off the rear and doing your own thing. But let's see. Let's see if we can make it even without the draft. Because there's a lot of brake locking going in here. AI racing each other very, very hard. And that's one thing I love about this AI when they're tweaked in the JSON file to make mistakes. To have a variance of ability, so it's almost like you get the whole Pro-Am experience, is that they'll actually make moves on each other. You're going to start seeing that happening. Not sure if it's going to happen now. Oh, there it is, right up in front. That guy making a move on the inside. And he's done it. I think he's taken a place. Oh, he's on the outside. Yep, he's made it. He's made it. Mr. Silver up there has taken first place by moving to the chicane. I mean, this AI, as I was telling you guys in a prior video, will race you. If you know how to tweak it, it will give you a right proper race. But you need to know how to train them. You need to know how to set them up. And that's something I will be going over in a future video. Again, still in disbelief that this is a free mod. Considering that it's free, it's an absolute no-brainer to pad out your collection of LMP cars in rFactor 2, make it an even greater multi-class sim. I'm not really sure if anything else competes with it in that regard. I mean, I guess you could say iRacing does. If you're that way inclined, if you're an iRacing fan. As I shoot out wide, I'm still trying to work out the balance of performance in this car, but I'm so insecure with the brakes. I'm so afraid of locking them, because locking your brakes in this car is pretty much the end of your race. But I'm definitely having a lot of fun just trying to catch these guys, trying to see if I can keep it nice and solid and consistent. Maybe the AI will make a mistake or two and I'll be able to catch up. That's the hope anyway. As I lose the rear end going into that turn, absolutely terrifying. Of course, unable to drive with the aero completely off on this car, so the standard GT car rules that we know from rFactor don't quite apply to the LMPs in the same way. It's still very throttle happy, it's still very much about pushing the cars through the turns on throttle, something I'm not proficient at with the LMP2s just yet, hence why I lose all this time. Oh, as they lock heavily going to the last chicane. I love taking anti-cut and sausage curbs in rFactor 2, it's so good. It's so bouncy, it's so spongy, you feel like there's genuine chassis flex, tire flex. It isn't just this broken movement that you get in some other sims that just kind of bounce you off like you've hit a concrete block, which I mean, I guess you have in some cases, but you know, it's a concrete block connecting with rubber on some level. It isn't two concrete blocks connecting to each other. I love this section, I love this little complex of turns, I love hooking it on the inside, getting that little divot, and experiencing the fully laser scanned version here, industry leading in rFactor 2, absolutely amazing. I love the feeling of those curbs, the anti-cut on the outsides. It just lets you feel what's going on as I start to catch up to this little mob here again. What? Oh, hey, trying to get me, trying to push me out there. See, they'll race you. They will actually do some moves. I mean, that's the kind of defensive driving I can get behind. As I try to push through with the throttle to rotate the car and gain some time, I'm still not completely confident. Bear in mind, this is like my third attempt maybe driving this car ever, and I never drive prototypes, so this is really, you know, I'm really, I'm really learning things here as we do this. So the fact that I'm even able to keep up with this mob makes me very, very smug and proud of myself. As I experienced some mid-corner understeer there, that was definitely one of the issues I was experiencing, was a kind of mid-speed understeer, I guess you could say. I was afraid of putting too much downforce on the front for fear of the car spinning me out, because certainly a spin is something that's far harder to recover from than, than going wide. As you can see, the time of day getting ever and ever later. We start to develop that nice yellow hue. I believe it's getting cloudy in the in-game world as well. As I try to get back to first position here, you can see the shadows getting nice and long. rFactor 2 in 4K, man, didn't think this day would ever come, to be honest. This is the very first race I ever ran on my 3080 on the OLED TV. I don't know what to say. The OLED technology for racing or for gaming or for anything, for workstation use, for editing this video, absolutely brilliant. The blacks are so inky, the contrast ratio is so insane. Compared to using an LCD, it's worlds apart. I was so immersed, I was so engrossed in this race, much as I was in our recent feature of Assetto Corsa's Rain mod. It's a whole new way of experiencing games, and I can't wait until OLED. No! As I grab the inside curb, way too aggressively, go spinning out wide, pirouetting into the gravel, like a bad game of golf. And I think that's the end of my race, guys. But you know what? I think it was a pretty decent race. The AI raced me really well. I had a ton of fun in this car, and you know, while I'm sorry I can't give you any technical information because I'm definitely not a guru about these cars, I don't drive them very often at all. I gotta say, if you set yourself up an endurance race, if you race online or even offline, if you can set this up to go for an hour or two, once you start lapping the GTE cars, you're gonna have an absolute blast, just like I did. Unfortunately, I didn't start to catch the GTEs, the LMP2s, but I'm sure once we started mixing it up with them, things would have gotten really, really cool. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this short little feature of the new Ginetta. Make sure to check it out in the Steam Workshop. I'll try and have a link for you down in the description below. If you're interested in community racing, make sure to join our Sim Racing Legends, simracing.gp community. Join our Discord down below as well, and make sure to smash that sub, give the video a like, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.